Okay, we're going to get started here. It looks like we have a good number of people in the room. Um, and welcome to On the Park Bench, a public square conversation brought to you by the Congress for the New Urbanism. On the Park Bench presents interactive conversations with thought leaders in new urbanism and allied fields related to the built environment. And today we have Learning from the Villages with Fernando Pages Ruiz and Andres Duany, moderated by myself, Rob Steuteville. So share your thoughts on hashtag on the park bench, www.tinyurl.com/OTPB feedback. And think about joining us for CNU 34. CNU 34 will be in Northwest Arkansas in late spring of 2026. This will be the first time CNU will go to a region with a constellation of smaller towns and cities as opposed to one large central city. Go to cnu.org/CNU34 to find out more. And once again, we're going to be talking about the villages today, which is well known as a gigantic master planned retirement community in Central Florida. It's certainly not new urbanism, but there may be some things that new urbanists can learn from the villages, and we're going to find out about that. Fernando Pajes Ruiz has developed affordable housing in California, the Midwest, and the Mountain States. His projects have won numerous awards, including the Green Building Single Family House of the Year and the Workforce Housing Award from the National Association of Home Builders. He is author of several books on affordable housing and is an urbanist who often speaks at CNU from the builder's perspective. He recently spent some time in the villages, and he's going to speak from that experience. Andres Duany is co-founder of DPZ Co-Design, a leading new urbanist firm. Duany is one of the founders of the Congress for the New Urbanism. He is internationally known and influential urban designer and author, and who has also studied the villages. I'm Rob Steuteville, editor of CNU's Public Square. Welcome, Fernando and Andres, to On the Park Bench. First, the panelists are going to present, and then I will ask them some questions. Then I will open it up to Q&A from the audience. So please use the Q&A function of Zoom to ask your questions as they occur to you. And now I'm going to stop sharing and let Andres and Fernando take it away.
Right. Okay. So Fernando and I agreed that I would make a short introduction. He would give the statistics and his recent experience there. And then I would draw some 10 lessons that are applicable to the new urbanism. My introduction consists of this. Before we were called the new urbanism, we were called neo-traditional urbanism. And that was a term of art that was covered in David Brooks' Bobos in Paradise. And the definition of neo-traditionalism was the non-ideological selection of what works best. And it's still a very valid book. And when we look at the villages, we're looking at it from the neo-traditionalist lens of let us see what works about it that we can bring in. In other words, we're not categorically against it. The reason we should not be categorically against it is that since 2017, it was founded in 1970. Since 2017, it's been consistently the best-selling community in the United States in terms of the number of houses it sells, dwellings that it sells. And I don't think that we can actually continue to pretend that we know what's happening in American urbanism without studying this particular development. Okay, so we're looking at it to see what the lessons it holds for us. And it does indeed hold some lessons. The other thing is that we have been, this isn't some innovation, some 8 or even longer years ago, when we first heard of it, and we heard of it from everybody. Liz and I spent 3 days and 2 nights there in one of the town centers, and we went through the most thorough sales sequence. We said, we're really interested in buying, and they gave us the best, who says we want the best salesman, and we learned as much as we could already 7 or 8 years ago. I've been trying to persuade people to look at this place. And the first one to take me up on it was Fernando. And Fernando has a much more recent experience, and he has done some research, but above all, I want him to speak once he has shown us the statistics to see whether you can understand his enthusiasm, or at least the enthusiasm that he's discovered for the people who live there, okay? And so he's gonna give also some personal experiences. And then I will try to answer questions, but preferably after I have listed some of the 10 lessons that it holds for us. Okay, so that's the sequence. Fernando, perhaps you can start telling us about what it actually is.
Sure. If you'd like me to start, I have a little slideshow just so everyone has a sense of what it looks like. You know, what is this place about? So I'll show my little slideshow, and then I'll talk a little bit about my visit to the villages. Well, that's just a little visual, so you have some idea in mind of what you'll see there if you visited the town. I went there because several unexpected people recommended it, among them Andres, but others too, that I thought would have no interest, either because they were wealthy enough to have no interest in a place like that, or they were cool enough to have no interest in a place like the villages. And I had some prejudice against it, thinking just an old folks' place. I read a book called Leisureville, which is against the villages. However, when I finished the book, my thought was, wow, I may like to live there. It had enough ingredients that were appealing to me that it was, you know, something that I thought could be compelling. And that's when I made the decision, and after Andres sort of recommended I do it, to go and take a visit of the place and get their best salesperson and really get the whole immersion. I noticed while signing on that there's a lot of
Can I ask,
pride
how
of
long
place.
how long were you there? How long were you there?
I was there for 5 days. They have several sort of packages. It's really inexpensive. As far as a vacation goes, it's cheap. It was like $600 the whole time. We had a little house to ourselves, a 2-bedroom house with our golf cart and a couple of bikes, and full reign, full use, a little car that, you know, as if we were longtime residents with full membership to any event, anything we wanted to attend, we could attend. So it was a really good immersion experience into the villages. I noticed there was a sense of pride of place. When people are signing on, they're all going, welcome from Miami, welcome from Maine, here I am in Calgary, with exclamation points. And you'll find that in the villages. And I guess that was the most striking thing when I got there. I met with the salesperson that was assigned to me. She was very nice. She gave me the keys, told me about the card, about all the clubs and the restaurants and all that. And there was at no point a sales pitch, which surprised me. And I asked her, why no sales pitch? I'm used to going to a timeshare and there's a very heavy sales pitch. No sales pitch. And she said, oh, well, we don't need it. It sells itself. And you'll see the residents will provide that. And it's true. There is such a pride of place in the residents. Everyone we met loved it. We didn't meet anyone. Some people had some small criticisms, which I'll talk about. But by and large, you have there 160,000 people that love their neighborhood. They enjoy all of the activities that are made available from night to day. You wake up in the morning, you ride your bike over to the pool, you swim, you do your workout in the workout club, you're feeling great in your body, you ride home, you hop into the golf cart, and then you head out for lunch, for example, at one of the town centers. There's a lot of nice restaurants, markets, things very similar to what you might see in a new urbanist neighborhood where they have, a big cafeteria style place with very fine grocers and little restaurants and breweries and such, very appealing. And you have a leisurely lunch there. Maybe there's some activity, there's a lecture, there's a trivia game, there's something, and there's all kinds of people everywhere you go. Although we went in low season, we went at the lowest season possible when it was supposed to be the hottest and most uncomfortable. So I was still surprised by the number of people out enjoying every single amenity. The swimming pools were full. You saw the people playing volleyball. The what?
Okay. You mentioned something that was 3,500 something or others that wasn't clear. Those are 3,500 self-initiated organizations, such as the Philosophy Club or the Harley Davidson clubs, etc. There are 3,500 organizations that are initiated by residents that are supported by the village with space, with address lists, and with financial subsidy. So there's a great deal of diversity in terms of the interests of the people.
Yeah, I asked about that because, of course, the face of the villages is a very blue collar place, and so I asked, well, how do you find your friends, your group of mutual interest? And they said that's all with these clubs. They call them lifestyle clubs. They're initiated by residents, and they have a big range. I met people that were involved in several clubs. I went in particular to the Philosophy Club because I thought, well, that's where I'll see, 10 or 15 intellectuals that live here. No, there was like 350 people in the room, and it was very engaged. And there was a very strong contingency. Just to give you a sense that there's a variety of cultural backgrounds. They have their own symphony orchestra staffed by villagers that are ex-instrumentalists for things like the Boston Pops or the Metropolitan Opera that have moved down there. So they have some real good quality residents, including architects, who are the ones that then villager resident architects are the ones that, man the design review board, for example. So if you wanted to paint your house blue, they would consider whether that was appropriate or not for your neighborhood.
Fernando,
so there's
show the statistics so they can see what we're talking about in terms of size and people and towns and number of town centers. Because we haven't presented physically how large this place is yet.
Well,
you talk about it, but do you have that
80,000. Yeah, I do. I'm scrolling to it. There's about 80,000 residences, homes that are built, with about 160,000 people that are currently living there. They have plans for another 60,000 homes right now, permitted. In other words, in the works. And I'll share my screen here in a second. I'll show you some statistics about the place. I'll start with a picture of the Philosophy Club, just because I think that's interesting. I'm looking here, sorry, for the sharing button, the share button somewhere here.
Along the bottom.
Yeah, no, I know where it is. It's just I got a bunch of tabs open, so there's the Philosophy Club. It was standing room only by the time it was. We got there about 5 minutes early, but the problem with all these old people is they get there 15 minutes early, and so you have to, wherever you're going, you have to kind of get there really early to get a comfortable seat. So we were in the back, which enabled this photo.
Let me talk about these clubs a
Yeah.
little bit. If you have the idea, since we're at the club, if you have an idea for a club, for an organization, they will give you the mailing list, they will give you a room, and they'll give you a few $1,000s to start it. And if you succeed in having members and a continual program, they will continue to subsidize it. So there's a lot of, unlike most developments in which the developer programs what goes on, in this case, it's actually initiated by the members with a lot of agility. It's easy to start a club.
Yeah. And there's all kinds. There's everything there's a World War II club, bocce ball clubs, dancing. There's all kinds of dancing clubs. And you see
they take
ballroom dancing.
There was an Eastern Airlines club. I think there was actually somebody told me there was even a club for ex-truck drivers. Actually, I remember distinctly, that kind of thing. So you can actually find the diversity may not be by race, but it is absolutely by income. There's a lot of income diversity here and a lot of cultural diversity.
Yeah, and the people make friends across income lines, if you will. There are very wealthy people that have second homes or have become primary residences as they get old enough. And they have friends, across economic lines, doctors and truck drivers and such. And some doctors we talked to spoke about that as being one of the things that they found appealing. They weren't insulated within their thought ghetto, if you will.
One thing that they do. Can I just talk about that a little bit? Americans generally dress the same way when they're in Florida. Whether they're truck drivers or doctors, particularly the males dress the same way. But one of the things that they do, which is fascinating, is they control. You can pay more or less for a house, but the houses are not allowed to brag. They're highly controlled in terms of their expression. It reminds me of college, in which for 4 years there may be rich kids and poorer kids and very poor kids, but the way they're handled in the dormitories and in the cafeterias, they get rid of the class distinction. And it's very much like an American university where everybody's equalized, at least for 4 years. I actually saw a truck driver and not a doctor, a truck driver and somebody who owned a trucking company actually having dinner together. Obviously a wealthier and a less wealthy guy. Anyway, could you read this out, please? Listen to these statistics.
These are some of the statistics about the physical size of the place. It's quite large, and their plans for development are very large. And these 60,000 additional homes planned through 2045 do not count the workforce housing, which they're also building. And the workforce housing is a similar neighborhood, but for young people, for young families. So in the villages, for example, they concentrate on the kinds of things that older people like: golf clubs. They have all kinds of, they have more golf courses than any other development. They also concentrate a lot on medical services, especially for seniors, geriatric medicine, all kinds of things, keep your memory, stuff like that. In the youth area, in the workforce housing, they have early childhood education, preschool, primary school, middle school, high school, with fantastic facilities, even a special autism center. And they really concentrating on top-notch education.
Okay. The only difference with the workforce housing, the workforce neighborhood, is that it's not age restricted.
Right. Exactly. It's the same. It has a town center that's quite walkable. The villages are not walkable. They're golf cartable. But the youth area, the workforce housing, is very walkable. You can walk from every house to the town center. In fact, that's what we did. We walked all around because it caters more to the younger people.
You showed 2 town centers. There are 4 town centers, and one of them looks like a spectacularly good new urbanist project from, let's say, the 1990s. There are 4 separate ones with separate characteristics, but there are 4 town centers, and each one at night, every evening, has a concert, which is the social which is the social solvent that brings people in for 2 hours. And that's when they gather.
Yes.
And they have different
That's
music.
what people do in the evening. That's what people do in the evening. They go to the town center, free concert, they enjoy the music. They may go to one or the other, depending on who's playing and what's going on. And they sit at the bars that surround the town center. They have dinner,
And-
maybe they just have a
and
drink,
the
they talk.
And the town centers are, because the music is good, attracts people of all kinds. It's not just the residents.
Yes.
You'll see teenagers going to the rock concerts. You'll see all sorts of people. The town centers are not closed. They're completely open, and they attract a huge number of outsiders. It's just, now, in the absence of anything else north of Orlando, you're right, there's nothing else to do. But nevertheless, they are open, and it's the best scene going every evening.
Now, a couple of things I found notable there were, one, they have a daily newspaper, and many villagers contribute to it. So if you wanted to be a journalist or a writer throughout your life and never had the chance, you can actually, start writing about your vacation, and you'll get a professional editor and all to help you with that piece, and it'll be published in the daily newspaper. They have a daily newspaper. That's something that's missing. And that daily newspaper is delivered to every single person in the villages. So everyone gets a take on what's happening today, like you have in those free newspapers that tell you, these are the concerts and these are the things you can do today. That newspaper gives you all that information, plus a fair amount of stuff from the wire services about world news and then a lot of local information. Golf cart sale at such and such. Some of it feels a little hokey, but it's very local, very appropriate to who lives there.
Fernando, the thing about their size, one of the advantages of size, is that the staff is enormous, which mentioned in terms of editors for the newspaper. You also have all sorts of services of that kind that no small project will provide. There's a huge multiplier with
Yes.
in the staff because of the size of it.
Yes, you can really live there without getting bored, because you can go, and the places are quite different. I mean, they have very average restaurants that are like neighborhood dining places, and they have very nice high-end restaurants with foie gras and escargot and nice desserts and all that. There's a big range, or you can get a hot dog. And so for everyone, there really is a place, and many places they have a full complement of markets, everything from small little markets that sell the local organic produce to Costco. So there's it's really quite impressive what they've been able to get in terms of the commercial amenities.
Now,
the other thing is
I was
the
going to mention
personal.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was going to mention. Just think about the thing about golf carts. Could you talk more about the golf carts and their parking? And also remember, we designed for a 5-minute walk, which is about 160 acres. I think if we designed for a 5-minute golf cart, you probably have almost 1,000 acres easy for a 5-minute ride. And so there's enough population to support these town centers. I think the golf cart is something we have to seriously look at. And of course, they don't have to look like golf carts, but these small neighborhood electrical vehicles is something we have to seriously look at in terms of expanding the viability of our town centers. We simply need more than 160 acres to feed each town center.
They have about, I think it was around 160, 170 miles of trail, a lot of which are in fact multimodal trails, in the sense that you can go on a bike, you can walk, you can use your golf cart there. It's not walkable. There are no sidewalks, for example, but it is highly,
well, there are
you can get anywhere in a golf cart. Yeah, of course, in the town centers,
in
there
the town
are,
centers,
but you
it's just as walkable as any community. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But you can get anywhere in a golf cart relatively quickly. Like from our place, and this is why there are multiple town centers. From our place, we could get to pools and things like that within a 5-minute or less bicycle ride, or we could get to any of the town centers, restaurants, etc., within a 6-minute golf cart ride. And I'm being precise about 6 minutes because I timed it. How long does it take to get there? And it's kind of pleasant. The maximum speed is 20 miles an hour. So even though you're going quite a bit faster than walking, you're really going at a nice pace. And it's totally appropriate for older people.
There's one thing I was going to say about the golf carts. it's much easier handling the parking in the town center with a golf cart than, all of our town centers are just absolutely choking on parking, because we park them in parking garages, we park them in parking lots that we try to hide and so forth. The golf carts are not quite a quarter the size of a car. They're much more agile and they're much friendlier in terms of having vehicles in the pedestrian area. I think golf carts need to be seriously looked at. Okay.
It's
Robert,
it's very
how long do we
appropriate
have?
for the 8th.
I'm sorry.
How long do we have left?
I think we're good.
We're like
We're not halfway through.
Okay, go.
Through. Andreas, maybe you should talk about the 10 lessons.
Okay, there are 10 lessons that I think we would understand. Now, the idea, what should be perfectly clear here, that what they're brilliant at is programming, okay? They're not brilliant at physical design, but they're brilliant at ideas. And of course, this project is now getting to be, it would be 50 years old. And it did not begin this way, but it did actually develop all these technologies that I think we can inherit within the physical manifestation of the new urbanist communities. But before I do this, I want to point something out that I believe we have lost in terms of the new urbanism. When we began the new urbanism, what we wanted to do was to break up the social isolation of the suburbs. Okay, we didn't like people having to be in their cars and going to these shopping centers, etc. What has happened to the new urbanism in the last few years is that in the pursuit of climate mitigation, we have identified that our principal tool is tailpipe emissions, reducing tailpipe emissions. And the way we reduce tailpipe emissions is by fostering bicycling and transit. Now, once you get into transit, then you get into relatively high density. So we have this formula in new urbanism, which is tailpipe emissions, therefore transit, therefore high density. And we see one discussion after another, about TODs and et cetera, and we give awards to projects. And I look at these projects, and it seems we have forgotten this sociability, which was our initial intention to engage. This social isolation has now been declared basically a disease. And the loneliness and the enemy that you read over and over again, bowling alone, is within our purview to mitigate. We can mitigate social isolation. One of the things this reminds us, this project of the villages, is that there is no social isolation in this place. Everybody's out all the time, and that leads to my first lesson. One of the things about when you live in Europe is that everybody's out on the street. The streets are fantastic. The cafes are fantastic. The street life is fantastic. One of the things that induces that is that the apartments are really miserable. They're small. The apartments are not. You don't invite people to your apartments for parties. You don't invite people for your apartments for dinner. You go out to the cafe. The villages has figured this out. If you visit the little houses, the houses they have, they're really nothing. They couldn't be more simple. They're kind of ranch houses with a garage door in front, 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a kind of family room and a very small yard. And so they're selling from 100 to 200,000 beginning price. So as we pursue the dream of affordability, our town centers are a tool that I think we can deploy to take the pressure off the houses to become the social centers. So that's the first lesson. That is, make sure that our town centers are more attractive than our houses. Okay. Now, the second thing is that becomes very obvious that music is the great solvent that attracts people. It attracts people of all ages, depending on your taste in music. It attracts people of all incomes. It attracts people of all races. And because there are 4 town centers with 4 music every night, and they play for a very limited period, what you create is what used to be called a festival. Now, a festival is a technical term. It's a Roman term that says an event that has a consistent theme, location, and date, okay, or time. So you put three things together. The theme is music, the location is the town center, and the time is, I think, probably, I don't know what it is, from 5 to 7. Remember, this is before dinner, which means if you feel like socializing that night and you go to the town center where you know the population will be there in droves, you can actually find your dinner companion. And that happens in 4 places consistently every single day. And I think that kind of programming and taking music, which by the way is not that expensive. We have ideas like golf courses and things like that. But I think that the town center and music as a quote unquote festival is something that we should look at. Okay. I already spoke a little bit about the control of the price point. And a lot of what is the problem with suburbia is not that the people are different. It's just that their subdivisions, their pods where they live look more or less expensive, right? And the developers play on that. The McMansion is a manifestation of pretension, really. I'm richer, therefore I blow up my roof like to look as large as possible. The village is exactly the opposite. It seems to crush architecture in the residential areas. And it leads to the inability to brag in terms of your address and what your house looks like. Okay, that's very interesting also. Now, the one thing I want to point out is that it's not only the music at night, but the fact that people go out for breakfast and they're the equivalents of diners, and people go for lunch. There's an intense concentration of 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at around midday, and 2 hours around 7, in which all hands are on deck. So instead of spreading the excitement all through the day, which means if 10 people are out or 100 people are out, they don't meet each other because it's spread over 12 hours. What they do is they concentrate the events 3 times a day. And so the public spaces are very, very socialized. They control leisure time and they intensify it, okay? The entertainment from your house, city, offload, public, okay. Something you should know, there are no condominiums at all. There are no condos because of lawsuits. And this is something they told me. There's no mixed use and there are no condos because the lawsuits are endless. So it's rental. And now this is something that might interest you. You can buy a house there before you reach the age of, let's say, 55, and they will rent it for you. So the sales are available while you're still young. In fact, our salesperson owns 6 houses, and they will rent it for you. So you can prepare your housing before you actually need it, and it's a source of income. So there are lots of rentals. It's like an organized Airbnb situation, without the disruption that Airbnb happens because it's centralized. They'll rent the houses for you. Okay, there are no condos. Now, about different generations, there are lots of rules that you can break. One of the reasons, and I want to get back to this, you are allowed to have a spouse that is as young as you like. Okay, you don't have to, everybody doesn't have to be over 55. Okay, you can have a spouse. Also, anybody of any age can visit you for a limited amount of time. For example, your kids can come for 1 month. They just can't settle in. And then the other thing, which is really very touching, because grandparents love their grandchildren, there's quite a lot for grandchildren to do in the town centers. Now, they don't like the kids, they don't like the young people in the pools. Each pod has a pool. And the fact is that most children that are not your children are irritating to others. Particularly American kids are extremely irritating, and American teenagers are unbearable, even to their own parents. And so one of the reasons they have the age grouping, because you ask yourself, why is it just for older people? Why is it age constrained? And when you ask the question, they actually say it's to keep the kids out from the public spaces because it distorts the interaction of adults. So that's an aha moment that I had. It's not that you have to be old because we love old people. It's just that kids are not, particularly American kids, are not known to for good behavior. Just go to Miami Beach and see what happens there. Okay, so
They
that's
have
also interesting.
family pools, Andres. They have
They what?
family pools. So when your grandkids visit, you can go to the one of the family pools, and
Yeah,
then
but it's
there's
not.
all
But it's not
kinds
the
of
pool
kids
in
in
the
that
pod.
pool.
It's not the pool in the pod. It's not the pool in the pod. You know, the pool that is in the
There is not
they're
a
small. They're
there is not a family
yeah.
pool in every rec center, but there are family pools scattered throughout.
Yeah.
You can head to a family
Yeah.
pool when you want to.
Okay, so you have a choice like that. By the way, these so-called walled communities that are residential are not walled at all. They just have a gate that goes up and down just to control the parking. Okay, you can enter, you can walk in all you like, everywhere. It's just you can't bring your car in to a residential cluster. And of course, the car is the plague, not the people walking by. So that's interesting about age restriction. Now, the workforce housing is something that I think we should all take into account, because the support of any residential area, including new urbanist ones, we've got to have staff. People mow the lawn. You know, people pick up the garbage. People take care of health. People are yoga teachers, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know of a single community that provides workforce housing for the sake of the primary residents of the community. In other words, it's not an abstract concept. We got to have workforce housing because we got to be nice to everybody. No, it's workforce housing because we need people to work. We need people to run the restaurants. We need people, and then the people are highly trained. Right, Fernando? The realtors get 6 months training, right? You told me something like that. They're
Yes,
highly trained.
the realtors have to have their state license, which is 180 hours classes plus some apprenticeship. And then when they go to sell at the villages, they have 6 months of 40-hour-a-week training for village sales. So they're quite knowledgeable and very specialized in selling those neighborhoods.
Yeah. Yes, and one gets the feeling that everybody's trained. The people who take care of the gardens, the people who pick up the garbage, the people who steam clean, right? The people who steam clean
Yes.
The houses so they don't get the mildew. The people who come in and repair things. Mm-hmm. In other words, there's a retention. I think one of the pleasures of living there is that you're actually relatively problem-free. It's not up to you to repair your plumbing or et cetera. You see, and that's clever.
The place is impeccable. The landscaping, right. The trails are impeccable. They're washing the houses down. If you put your garbage out, there's no garbage cans. There's no bins and stuff that they pick up once a week. They'll just pick your garbage up as soon as you put a bag out on the front lawn.
Yeah, so then you don't need, which means you don't need the big trucks. You know, the garbage can once a week leads to the enormous trucks. Now, one last thing I was going to say about this, it's only one. They also control resales. Because not only are the houses profitable, and what is it, Fernando? They build your house in 90 days. Is that what it is?
Yes.
What did you tell me?
Contract signature to handing you the keys and you move in 90 days. Guaranteed.
90 days. Okay, so there's some real expertise there. But the thing about the last thing I was going to say about the financial, of course you make a profit, selling houses, right? But it doesn't have to be a big profit. That's why they sell for so little, because there are two other profit centers. One is the rental program, which is of course shared by the developer. So there's an additional source of income by the developer. And the other thing, which is very clever, is they control the resales. And once you have 80,000 units, you don't have to build 4,000 units a year, because another 4,000 come up and you still get the 6%. So what they figured out is something like the old garden cities, in which every time there's a sale, the English garden cities, every time there's a sale, there's income that comes into the kitty, and to basically supplement the public activities. And it's very organic. Of course, there are homeowners associations. They will listen to the homeowners association. You have to, but it's controlled. Like the developer is the boss. And because of you don't have to hand over the community until it's 80 or 85% sold. So the continuous provision of the permitting, in which there's still 60,000 to go, means that the developer, even after 50 years, doesn't have to hand over. Now, the developer has to listen and has to be benevolent, And in the case, the family who is now in the second or third generation is absolutely beloved.
Mhm.
They're statues to the guy, right? There are
Yeah, there's
statues.
statues in the
It's
town
like the
centers.
founder, George Washington, is there. And so there's all this evidence. Now, we say, I think the software is absolutely fabulous. Now, what about the hardware? There's not a single thing that the new urbanists can't do better, okay? But I have to say, as we get better and better with our architecture and better and more sophisticated with our tree planting, we get better and better with our tech all the time. We're incredible. The way we design streets and landscaping and parks and civic buildings is we've reached the high point. We've restored the high point of American urbanism. I think the new urbanists. The problem is our programming is way behind the ball, the 8 ball. And I think this is the lesson that they say: be alert to this. Let's learn what works with this community. That's all I have.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that very interesting presentation. I think that there's a great deal of skepticism on the part of new urbanists out there on the villages. I mean, it seems to violate so many things that new urbanists have, faith in. They have faith in walkability. They have faith in diversity. Do you think that this place, how can a society that is only people who are over 55 years old, how can it be a place that's healthy?
Okay. I think if Fernando had shown you the videos he took of people dancing, you would realize that this is the tail end of the greatest generation. Okay, and one of the things that this country has done, it has really integrated since that generation. You can see it in the young people. It's everywhere you see in the United States, you see the older people are racially segregated, by preference. People like their own kind. But I find the young people are one of the great successes of U.S. integration. I think that people are, you see Asian kids and Black kids and all sorts of kids because of the integration of the schools. I believe when the younger generation comes in, it will come with that generation. I think they'll come in and they'll be much more integrated. What I think I think it's actually more difficult to integrate by class. For example, if you go to Seaside, sure, there are Black people, okay, black young people, but they all went to the same Southern colleges. They're all frat boys, right, and sorority girls. But that's not integration by race. That's integration by class. What the Villages adds to all this is integration by class, quite frictionless. And I think it would change. It's going to be there when we retire. Rob, I might even say, come on down, and you might be surprised, how many new urbanist clubs there are. I don't know, but it could very well happen that it improves the way our society improves.
What do you?
They're very aware. They're very aware that each generation is different. And as they design the new town centers, they're on their fourth, but building the fifth. And each town center is geared more and more towards the newer retirees that have a different sensibility than the older ones.
Yeah.
And I think Andres is correct that a lot of the lack of diversity just comes from the generation that's there. But there is diversity. There are Black people there. There are Hispanic people there. There are lesbian and gay people there. There is diversity. It's just not what strikes you. What strikes you at first, of course, is the homogeneity of it. You see a lot of white folk. Now, what happens there that's different than other places is there's a disinhibition that happens to people who've spent a lifetime inhibited, which was to me the most wondrous thing. I'm from Latin America. I'm used to that at the dance party, everyone is dancing, that every party becomes a dance party. That's very rare in the United States, where people are really, really, especially men, are really hesitant to dance. It's not a dancing culture. Even at the new urbanist dance, you see a lot of weird kind of dancing. At the Villages, you see all of these old guys, some of them dorky as could be, but really expressing themselves with a lack of inhibition. They have really found a place they can be themselves. And that's what I found most heartwarming about the place, just the social environment that's safe, a safe space for these folks. I don't see anything wrong with that. And they're trying to recreate that now in the workforce villages. Same foundational idea.
Now, that
Make a
doesn't mean
place
that the
where blue
clubs aren't going to
cardboard
be,
people
for
live like
example,
millionaires.
I think there's going to be segregation at the level of the clubs. You know, nobody's going to go to the philosophy club that didn't go to college.
Sure.
You know, the Harley clubs are going to be certain kinds of people. You know, they're probably going to be legal marijuana clubs. You know, that kind of thing. But you have to wait for the generations. We're not so powerful. I've always thought, of course, I can integrate a new urbanist community. Just elect me Stalin, and I will tell people where to live. I think the idea that new urbanism is going to somehow has the power to integrate people, you know, by race and by class and so forth is absolutely fantastical. We can't do that. People like their own kind. Now, because society has been improving, you know, the arc of civilization, I think the next generation is going to be quite the way we would like to see it. And the generation after that, even better. You know, I want to say one thing about the town centers, which so the town architecture falls out of style. Okay. We actually want our buildings to last forever. You know, we say, well, traditional architecture will last forever. Nothing lasts forever. Did not last forever. You know what I mean? Art Deco did not last forever. There is a constant, unfortunately, architecture is part of fashion. And what they understand is what every single shopping center and shopping mall developer knows, which is you have to update your town center. For example, the largest town center there, immediately prior to the new urbanist one, which is the one I saw, is completely postmodernist. It's just postmodernist. It's high postmodernist. Robert Venturi, Charles Moore, all that. Well, guess what? It's dorky. That's the one that's being redone. You know, nobody wants to be seen there. And so they're able to redo it. They understand this. Now you say, well, that's odd. No, cities are redone also. Shop fronts are redone in cities. And I think we have to be more careful in the design of our buildings to make them not only flexible, but aesthetically flexible. I think the new urbanist buildings should be more simple and less committed to a style that is immutable. Okay, if you look at Stuart Grant's book, How Buildings Learn, that should be a central new urbanist text. How Buildings Learn. He talks about the flexibility of buildings and the flexibility of the look of buildings by choosing certain technologies and certain plan types. We don't do that in new urbanism. We have incredibly specific stylistic details and we have incredibly specific floor plans. That's not going to last. We have to learn some flexibility from real cities.
Let me ask you a little bit about the sense.
Go ahead.
You know, because this seems, the question is like, how do the villages create such a strong sense of community? And can we do the same thing in new urbanist communities or in just ordinary cities where new urbanists are working?
I think that the great tool that we have underappreciated is the homeowners association documents, which are available to all new communities. And there's some versions for the inner city, you know, the business improvement districts. The thing about HOAs, none of them have actually been used to their full capacity. First of all, to increase democracy, to increase choice, but also to get things, for example, to be more flexible. We're working on this on new HOAs, which are much more like government. And, you know, I don't know how many people know this, but there are between 200 and 300,000 homeowners associations in this country. It is the software for the hardware of new urbanism. I think that we've done enough hardware, enough with the architecture, enough with the nuances and the sophistications of the planning. Let's look at the software. Well, how are we governing these communities? How are we selling them? How are we supporting or not supporting certain merchants and so forth? I think we should have a whole Congress, which is all about the software community, and not even, you know, and let's not discuss architecture or you know, street widths or sidewalks. You know, we've done that. We're good enough. Sure, we can get better, but we're good enough with the hardware. And we're really in kindergarten when it comes to the software.
Just one more question.
This is a community.
Okay, go ahead.
These are
Fernando.
communities, Robert. Robert, these are communities. We talk a lot about aging in place. Aging house, so an old person could stay essentially a shut-in, where they can continue living in that house for. But this is kind of a community of aging in place in the sense that the environment, the exterior, the social environment is an aging in place environment. Where why do people move there? Couples move there because the guy dies, the widow is left with no friends, no connections, nowhere to go, except that because they've been living there, she now has this really vital social group. And there's that sense of safety and being able to be old in that place without any inhibition, without any excuses, without any limitations. And that's a really valuable type of community. They're trying to engineer that now for the young families, figuring it out. It'll be interesting to see if they do and how.
Let me ask you one more question, and we'll get to the Q&A from the audience. But, if golf cart urbanism is something the new urbanists should be taking more seriously, what do you think that would look like? How could new urbanists take this idea of golf cart?
Okay. The first thing I would do, first of all, golf carts, I don't know why we're ever against them. They are expensive, much less expensive, from $4,000 to $10,000. In fact, you can get the coolest looking Fiat or Citroen electrical vehicle for $9,000 delivered to your house. Okay, just you give them your American Express card, they deliver to your house. They're terrific looking little vehicles. First of all, they get rid of the garage, the huge wasted space of the double car garage, and allow the garage to become something else, such as the workplace at home. You still build the garage for those who want a car, but it allows the garage to become, that flex house that we're all yearning after, which is to say they work at home. The second thing about these little cars is that you can put them in the mortgage like an appliance. This is something we need to initiate as new urbanists, but you make the golf cart an appliance, just like a washer dryer. They last just as long, and then the mortgage covers it. So you actually get rid of the car, which as we know, is now owning a car is about $12,000 a year. Owning a golf cart is nothing. It's nothing. It's 10% down and whatever your mortgage is. It is so much more compact. It is so much lighter on the environment. I don't see that there's anything wrong with what we used to call golf carts. I think we should become golf cart urbanists. They're terrific. Now, forget the old golf carts that are dorky. Look at the new European ones. They're fantastic. And that will be coming. I just love the way that you don't have to suffer through the parking. Now, there's something that's an illusion, Rob. We think we're going to walk markets. We don't walk to markets because we can't carry a gallon of milk, okay? No one walks to the market to buy food. We buy too much food. I know because I'm in a walkable community. It's too heavy to walk a quarter mile with the groceries. You need a golf cart. And so I think I can't even begin to understand how we developed an allergy to this, but I think we have to really do this over again and stop calling them golf carts. They're called neighborhood electric vehicles. And if you want to know how cool they are, just Google Fiat Topolino and hold on to your credit card because you're going to want to buy one.
They have built some major infrastructure for these vehicles. I saw on Google that they had built, bridges for, specifically for neighborhood electric vehicles, like all over the villages.
Yeah.
Well, you have to cross. You have to cross highways. Remember, this is in 2 counties. Mm-hmm. It's how many acres is it, Fernando? 56,000 acres.
Something
There's
like that.
A real
60,000 acres, and you have to cross. It's like in 4 counties.
You have to cross
freeways.
You have to cross freeways and state roads. Yeah.
Let me get to some of the questions from some of the folks. Somebody asked, do villages live and work there? Is this only for vacationers? Obviously, people live and work there, but to what degree is this a year-round community?
I think it is almost entirely. These people don't have enough money
to a very strong degree. It's a year-round.
Yeah.
It is a year-round community. The majority of the people that live there are residents. Some people do live there and have it as a second home. Most people have it as a second home, like Andres said, buying it when they're younger and then transitioning to it when they're older. There's other types of ways of living there. You can rent and live there too. You can rent a house, you can rent an apartment. You don't have to buy a house, although most of the people do own their own homes. And they are between 200,000 and 300,000. I saw someone making that correction, just kind of a general range. But that today is a very affordable price range for many people.
Somebody asked, what's the difference between this and Celebration, Florida, which is on the other side of Orlando, major community built by Disney. Do you have any comparisons?
Yes, the Celebration is a completely conventional new urbanist community with lots of cars.
There is a Disney aspect to the community. I mean, it really is programmatic in the sense this is a place to come and have fun. The thing is, it succeeds at
well,
that.
the town centers are designed by Disney Imagineers.
Yeah, yes, the town
by Universal Imagineers. The town
Universal Studios. That's right. That's correct. That's the design. However, the thing is that they succeed with it the same way a kid is happy in Disneyland, looks forward to being in Disneyland. Older folks are happy in the villages, look forward to being there. So it succeeds at it. That's the main thing. I would look to how do they succeed? We saw little elements such as what they've got little bars at the corner of each stand-up, like kiosk type bars at the corner of each town center. The lines are made such that instead of being in one long queue, standing one behind the other, they snake the way they do at Disney. What does this do? As you're waiting for your beer to go buy your beer, you're actually standing next to people that
on both sides. Yeah, you're socializing.
You can talk to. By the time you get, there's a lot of very subtle things they do to create sociability.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned that there are people in Oriental North Carolina who use golf carts to get around. There are many other towns like this. They're not as famous as the villages. How common do you think this golf cart urbanism is becoming?
I don't think anybody's done urbanism yet. I think they've done golf cart suburbanism. These programmatic formulas await our intervention. They're starving for new urbanists to design, to just take on the program, stop arguing about over 55s, deal with it, see the assets, basically all the human happiness and sociability that ensues, and just help them out with good design. First of all, much more compact. They waste land incredibly. There's so much wastage. There's so much green swards everywhere, between the pool and the road and, the pods and everything. I think we could double the density and still have primarily fee simple housing.
Do you think that they are inspired at all by new urbanism in terms of their town centers?
Yeah, it's 100% sure. Yes.
Somebody asked, okay.
They don't have a variety of housing types, which is another thing that could be improved. They have single family homes and some apartments. That's it. They could have townhouses, row houses, cottages. They could have a larger variety of home styles too. They could allow a lot of those homes in greater proximity to the town centers, which of course they don't on purpose because they want to control the town center and don't want a lot of, homeowner types interfering with their management. Yeah. So they do have certain things that are somewhat autocratic.
In every new urbanist community, there's always conflict. There's irritation between the mixed use buildings with the shops below and the parties and the cafes and the nightlife. Nightlife interferes with the people who want to sleep above. Okay. Now there's much less of that that's one of the reasons they don't have residential above the shops. But that's not we could still do that. It would still be, I think they'd be much better if people live in town centers. They're leaving a lot of money on the, as they say, they're leaving a lot of money on the table by not being new urbanists. We could easily increase the density. We could easily decrease the infrastructural costs of all those roads, etc. I think we can do a better job with the same program.
Okay, I will say that we have now, it's now 1 minute past the 1 p.m. point, the hour point. Um, we can continue to ask some questions because there are many more, but we will be posting the video on the CNU website within about a day. I just want
So
everybody.
let's do more questions.
Okay.
Don't leave questions unanswered. Let's keep going.
Okay. To what extent is the use of bicycles allowed and encouraged in the villages? Could you answer that, Fernando?
Sure, they give you bicycles. We had two bicycles. That was the first thing we rode around on because I'd never driven a golf cart. I was a little bit intimidated. So we spent a couple of days on bikes. They give you bikes. There are people on bikes everywhere. There are people running everywhere. The activity level is enormous. There are old folks playing soccer. They have multiple soccer fields, and you see them running back and forth. It's intimidating, very athletic. But the physical activity is enormous. Walking trails, bicycle use is, everywhere. It's very common.
People ride the bicycles on the trails. There's trails everywhere. So there's a
Yes.
secondary system of getting around. There's not just the roads where the cars go. There are trails where you can avoid, a conflict with cars.
Yeah. I don't think
Yeah.
they have good
And there are
sections,
bikes, and along the roads, along the car roads, there are bike lanes. So you may have a section where to get to the trail, you may have a section that's on a road, but you have a wide bike lane there. And so you go on that bike lane, and then you get the safety thing is really been taken care of there. They've planned for it very well. Is it easy to
by the way,
retrofit into an
and there are
existing community? Probably not.
And there are buses everywhere. Also,
Yeah, little
there
trolleys.
are bus stops. And in the town center, there's quite a large bus stop with multiple buses. You can just wait there and be taken to your place.
These are small buses, they're trolley style buses,
Yeah.
and they're free.
Cheryl asks, what does the workforce look like? Are all of the businesses part of the village operation, or are the businesses their own businesses operating here?
Okay. I suspect that from other projects, we didn't ask that I suspect that the operators they're selected and they're subsidized in their what I call tenant improvements, so that they don't look impoverished. In other words, they're helped to succeed by giving them the ability to really get good interior design, a good kitchen, good decor. Okay, but I suspect that the developer owns 51%, because you have to be able to tell people to maintain standards, also get rid of them. From what I know about Seaside, the ownership is 51%. It's centrally managed. There are different merchants. It's 51% owned, and then the developer makes 10% of the gross, basically to run the town center and maintain it.
I don't understand. 50%, 51% owned by who?
By the developer.
The developer owns the majority of the business.
Owns the business 51%.
Okay.
You own the business, but the developer owns the property.
I see.
Also. No, but the developer, I think the businesses have to be owned by the developer. In case they do a lousy job, they have to be thrown out. That's very important. You can't serve a bad hamburger at Seaside. I know this. You can't serve a greasy hamburger at Seaside without somebody saying, Seaside's going to the dogs. It's just taking a dive. And I said, no, the hamburger's bad. Seaside isn't taking a dive. The hamburger is bad. But eventually, you really have to control the quality of everything that happens, because in a mixed-use community, people assume that what is a very local problem is a systemic problem for the whole thing. And so the developers really have to intervene. By the way, what's unusual about this one, as I said before, is that the developer has no plans of handing over. And that's rare, because at about 80%, the law forces them to hand over, and then the homeowners association runs everything. That's not going to happen here.
They don't run by homeowner association. They have districts. Under the district, they have multiple homeowners
Yeah. Right.
Association, a little bit like their
We
concept, Andres, of the little blocks, community blocks that then report to a higher level, The district is the higher level. Associations really only have control over enforcing the design covenants.
Yeah.
Who runs the districts? How is that run?
Is it the developer?
Is it
Must
yeah?
be.
Runs the districts. If
Well,
this is level of the
Oh, the developer runs the districts. Yes, the developer runs the districts. There are people that can be voted in from the community, but the developers run the districts. The family
Yes,
is
but
in every district. They
but
staff them, though.
this is perfectly conventional in all communities, in all new communities. The HOAs are run by the developer until the developer is done, and then it's handed over.
Gary has someone. Okay, go ahead.
No, in this case, there is no handover point. There is no plan to hand it over.
Yeah.
The family owns it in perpetuity, which is good and bad. It depends, I guess, on the generations and who inherits that business model. So maybe it'll change over time. But right now, the people seem to be very appreciative of the decisions that the family makes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gary says this sounds like a very controlled, sterile environment. Is that a fair comment?
I think it's sterile because the design isn't good enough. I think the right things are controlled. Like for example, the way the garbage is picked up, the way the lawns are mowed, etc. It's highly controlled. But they also have a lot of initiative, which is unusual. The fact that they have 3,500 clubs of common interest clubs is I think is a fantastic idea. 3,500 clubs. Whatever you want, you can do it. So it's not. I think it's controlled at the right level and decontrolled at another level. Now, I don't think you're going to find any house mildewing or much crime. In the villages, they would deal with that immediately. I think because it just hurts real estate value.
Liz asks, can you imagine this place ever changing from?
Yeah, there's nothing gritty.
Nothing.
Liz asks, can you imagine the villages ever changing from age restriction to a full community? Removing that age restriction.
It's an interesting question. Remember, the age restriction is only in the pods. So I think there would be nothing wrong with having some pods that are age restricted for those who want to live that way, and other pods that are good, that whole families can live in, at the level of the pod. But I'm speaking pods in the suburban sense, the pod, because it is a suburban layout. It doesn't have a grid or a block. I think the pods, in fact, I would recommend for their marketing that there be pods that are for full families easily.
Can you imagine like some of the best ideas of the villages be taken to a new urbanist development, but not having it age restricted?
I cannot imagine not doing it.
You cannot imagine.
I cannot imagine not doing it. In fact, we're all thinking about it because one of the things that, okay, now I want to bring something else up. The actual best-selling community in the United States is no longer this one, it's Margaritaville. Margaritaville is all about sociability. Now, when you have the two top communities being about sociability, that tells you something about what people are yearning for. And you can say, well, you all have to listen to music. Yeah, you have to listen to music, but you don't have to go to listen to music. It's just, what I find is music is the solvent, the social solvent that brings people in. It's like the bell of the church. On Sunday, the medieval town went to church and it was very sociable. And these concerts they have work that way. Margaritaville, I think, is a less sophisticated version of the villages. It's much newer, but it's arriving at the same conclusion. that people just feel very lonely now, and they want to overcome that.
We have a question from Aaron. What percentage of residents are completely retired in the villages? Do you get a sense for that? Are people still working? Do they have jobs? What's going on?
I get the sense that
I would say most of the people are retired. Most of the people I met are retired, but many of them have jobs. In fact, when you go to the stores and the restaurants and all, residents are the ones working. Ditto with the real estate agents and all. So they have employment at the villages, and the older people work at the villages, maybe part-time, etc. But I would say a huge percentage are retired but still working, and working to keep active, maybe to get some extra income.
But they work in the village themselves.
They work in the villages, yes.
Yeah, they work in the villages. Yeah, that's it. It's true.
We have a question from Adam. In 2065, will the 55-year-old Gen Alpha want to live in the villages? Will the villages have evolved and iterated in response to changing generational tastes? It's hard to...
I think they will actually do that better than the urbanist communities, actually, because of just the flexibility. No, let's not talk about the villages. The villages, we have to immediately think of what we would do with the program of the villages. Right now, I do think the villages are flexible, the way they redo their town centers and so forth. But I would like to think that we can do a better job instead of just avoiding it altogether. I think that's the point of this, is that we combine the new urbanist physical design with the program of the villages. Of course, the generation A is going to want different music. Of course, they're going to live a lot longer, presumably, and we have to be careful that we retain as much flexibility as possible, more than the villages has. We have to make certain that we're future oriented. By the way, I don't think the new urbanists are particularly future oriented ourselves. I don't think we think 30 years out when we design. We're very present oriented, in our thinking. I would love to just say, if it's not 30 years out, I don't want to hear about it. There's the whole story of Seaside. If we hadn't been thinking 30 years out, we would never have come up with a town. We would have just built townhouses on the beach. But we knew that if you thought 30 years out, there would be need for a school and a church and
the advantage
shops,
the villages has, Rob, the advantage the villages has is it's not constrained by an ideology of form, if you will, or of structure. So I think they will continue.
Do you have
they
to know
will
about,
continue responding to the market. In other words, they'll continue responding to the market. Whether retirement will still be a thing in 30 years and all, we don't know.
But Fernando, they're not clever about responding to the market. They're just kind of, they'll respond to the market because they have to. But I think we can be more clever than they are. Now, one of the things, for example, that's happening in France, look, I'm in this medieval village here. For the first 11 years we're here, only one church had mass on Sunday. And now 2 churches have masses on Sundays. And it turns out that France is now, this in the past 2 years, there's 17% more people going to church. And this is quite an atheist country. France is anti-clerical. So that's a change. Is the villages going to be able to respond to that? Will they be able to build suddenly, Islam meeting? Will there be enough yoga studios? I think that's our job, to make certain that we're flexible and not to imagine 30 years out. We have to imagine the flexibility that's required. We don't have to imagine the specifics of what Generation A is going to want.
We have a question from Ronald. Was the integration of infrastructure to support golf carts, i.e. charging stations, part of the original design, or something that has been retrofitted into the original design?
I don't know.
Charging stations have been retrofitted into original. They have charging stations for our electric golf carts, but they're mostly gas. Mostly they're gas.
Really? They're gasoline, the golf carts?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. In fact, I know this because I asked what happens if we need to refill our tank, and our realtor said, "Don't worry about it. One tank will last you a month, so you won't need to refill it." But they are primarily gas, and they are electric golf carts too, and they're electric vehicles, and they do have charging stations. So the newer parts of town may have them built in, but the older parts are retrofitted for sure.
But if you were to talk about the impact of the impact on climate change in the villages compared to any new urbanist community, it's probably as good as the best precisely because of the golf carts.
I have a question about
because you can go to the Piggly Wiggly, or you can go to the public supermarket, regular store, and that Costco has golf cart parking in the parking lot, little spaces for the golf carts. And so everything is being catered towards that. So you don't really need to get into your car. It's uncomfortable to get in your car to go to Costco. Just go in your golf cart.
Yeah, that's true.
I think wrap this up, but do you have any sort of final thoughts for us, Fernando or Andres, about the villages, and where do we go from here? Are there any communities that are doing, as you say, Andreas, possibly taking some of these lessons and applying it to more new urbanist design?
I think that yes, and if you're not, we're certainly doing it, okay, and we have been doing it for a while because, as I said, we visited 8 years ago, and you can't really eliminate the car yet. But you can design the garage so that it only happens to fit a car, but it's primarily a workplace or a flex space for other activities, including an additional apartment. I think the greatest waste right now in the investment in urbanism is the parking. And the parking will go away with self-driving cars. That's coming. And so the principal change that I would make to the infrastructure, to the front back situation, to the vehicles that have made our life so difficult, is I would assume that the self-driving vehicle, especially the small self-driving vehicle, will be a radical change in the future of urbanism. And the main thing that will happen is we're going to be able to have much tighter roads, much tighter, much more like the ones we love. And we're going to have garages that have to be designed like lofts, with 10-foot ceilings and beautiful garage doors that are glazed, that look like artist lofts in Paris or like shop fronts. And that we can start immediately. And I think that's going to be very popular very soon. It's coming so fast, the self-driving car and the self-driving electrical car.
Fernando,
what I think is going to happen? You know what I think is not going to happen? I don't think we're going to have any fixed rail transit. I think that actually the cars, the self-driving cars, will actually coalesce at 6-inch distance, fender bumper to bumper, and actually form the transit that we yearn for without having to build the rail. That is the future of public transit: is the cars that are not being used forming streetcars. I think Musk is probably working on that.
My recommendation as a closing statement would be to go visit the villages if it makes sense in terms of you're 45 or above, and you might actually kind of be able to understand the age group that's there. And if not, go visit the workforce housing if you're younger and see how
Fernando,
appealing that is.
Imagine the villages.
Normally, I would say
with people your age.
Normally, I would say go with an open mind, but I think you can go with a closed mind. Go with your closed mind. Go with your prejudices about the villages. And a week later, you will come out with a different point of view, because the experience is compelling. And some things need to be felt to be understood.
Yeah, you can't just visit and take pictures. You have to live it. You need to have two nights in a hotel to actually get the feeling for what's happening. It's not photogenic. Okay, it's incredibly not photogenic, but it is really very compelling. Lots of happy, lots of satisfied people surrounding you. Also, remember always, that the people there, if you retire there, it's going to be your generation, not the generation that you see there. They're going to be more like you. And imagine that. And then also think about the alternative. Do you really want to live in downtown Philadelphia? You know, in a townhouse? Do you want to live in a new urbanist community that doesn't have the full program that this does, that's not nearly as sociable? You know, there's some tough questions you ask yourself. Would I really prefer this if I were, even without the new urbanist overlay?
Well, Andres, Fernando, thank you very much. This was very interesting. Certainly a more challenging topic than many that we cover, but I think very interesting. So thank you for this, and we'll see you again on the park bench. And thank everybody for being here, and we will post this on the CNU website. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for doing this, Rob.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
take care.